Nigeria's National Petroleum Corporation says it has recently identified fresh $48 billion worth of oil and gas investment opportunities within the country. The Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority also has such mandate to attract investments into the country for oil and gas and associated services. General Manager and Chief Operating Officer of the authority's Special Purpose Vehicle, Cynthia Egurudu, identifies Nigeria as an investment springboard into the African continent. She says working with the oil and gas free zones provides opportunity at all levels.
If you're looking to do business in, say, emerging economy, you want where you have high population growth, you want where there's young population. First of all, because it's a large market, but also because you have a workforce that's trained. We're one of the best trained people in the world, Nigerians traditionally are. And so you want to come into a place where your workforce is skilled and trained, where you have a large market, which means they can buy your goods. You have a large bank to draw from, where capital is easy to access. So those are things. So those are reasons why we say come to Nigeria. We're open for business. So if you're an investor and you're looking at, say, your emerging markets or your next frontier markets, you then zero in on Nigeria. I've made the case for come to Nigeria. We're open for business. Now, coming into Nigeria, why do you want to get into a free zone? Okay. Now, if you're, in our case, we're the oil and gas free zones regulator. So if you're operating in the oil and gas value chain, upstream, downstream, and everything in between, and you have processing, you have import or exports, it then makes sense to become a licensee because we crash your cost of doing business.
That concept of having a trade zone that is focused primarily on oil and gas activities is not very common. Right, so, and we've seen it being a big success in country. The oil and gas trade zone provides a unique opportunity for the country to harness some of its internal capabilities. So you think about the fact that we're heavy in oil production. It is a decent opportunity for us to actually set up, develop our midstream and downstream sector. You have the likes of ONE free zone, and you have about 60 participants in the zone, and it's been the source of circa 60% of FDIs in country.
Initiatives of the Oil and Gas Free Zones Authority are structured to support Nigeria's oil and gas sector. And the authority says its chief strategy is to ensure that all due process burdens are taken off investors and licensees.
So you suspend all those costs, you crash your costs, and so you can then just concentrate on just adding value to what you're doing. We have made great inroads into not just Nigeria sector, but really the global market. We're getting more inquiries. We've been in doldrums, oil and gas has been in doldrums for a few years. But with this administration, we've opened up the door to the world, basically. We've taken up our mantle as the regulator of the zone. We make sure that you benefit from your incentives, but we're there to supervise, to make sure that we create an enabling environment. So if you're operating in our zones, we're there at your disposal. But to do that, you need to become a licensee. So you need to then be a free zone enterprise and get our license and then receive all those incentives. So it's not enough to just acquire space on air, for instance. It's the license that makes a difference. That's what entitles you to the incentive. We've focused our energy on attracting investors to Ikokiri, which is a Greenfield. It's an island off River State. In fact, it's on the axis. It's 2 kilometers away from One zone as we know it. And then there's the Brass. Brass is more brownfield. Notora is brownfield. But what we've done is we partnered with PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to identify and rank for us in terms of focusing our energy on free zones to market into. We don't want a scattergun approach. And so if you're going to concentrate our effort, let's determine based on global benchmarking where we should focus our energy on. PwC have come back and they've given us what we already know. Ipokiri is great, is a great prospect for development. It's already a designated free zone, so half the work has been done. It's just to then go in and develop it. We want to make it into an oil and gas city. And so we're looking for investors, developers who have the technical expertise and financial muscle to turn that into what we have envisioned it to be, which is an oil and gas city. That's a greenfield. You then have Notori, which is, again, in the honor axis, which is licensed by us. It's already got some development work going in, but we're looking now to populate it with tenant investors.
You can apply for a free zone license if you have on a barren land. So there's completely green land, and you can apply for the license, and obviously you would have to convince the free trade zone that you had the potential to grow, to develop the land and do et cetera, et cetera. That's what they refer to as green land, green fields. A brownfield is one like Notori, whereby we already had an industrial city, we already had a fertilizer plant, a power plant, and what have you. We already had the commercial offices and the residential, and then we subsequently applied for a license. That they call a brownfield. In other words, it's an industrial city that was already in existence. It's not brand new, and that's the fundamental difference. They would then apply to the oil and gas free trade zone for a license as an enterprise. The oil and gas free trade zone will go through their usual process, and they will grant them a license, and that license allows that company to operate within that territory.
I think the conversation around whether you want to go into a brownfield zone or a greenfield zone has to do with your appetite for real estate. Because when you're talking about zones, you're talking about a combination of oil and gas trade zones. You're talking about a combination of oil and gas activity and real estate. And that's where they intersect. For a greenfield, it means that usually not much development has gone into the zone. So it means if you're coming in, you're also coming in wearing the hat of a real estate developer, and you are ready to take on some of that developmental costs. With recovery of those development costs in the short to medium or on the long term, depending on what your business strategy is. But obviously with a brownfield, you're here for business. Real estate is not really your game, your thing. Somebody has already taken some of the risks with respect to investments in developing that zone. So you're only coming in as a participant and to enjoy the available benefits of running the zone.
Beyond ease of doing business and opportunities to choose between green and brownfield areas, prospective investors and licensees, according to the OGFZA, have a plethora of opportunities to choose from, as well as business partnership models designed to further facilitate ease of doing business and to boost investments.
For the investor, they have plenty of choice. Now, our zones are primarily in the oil and gas belt, Niger Delta, with also port proximity. So, which means if you're expecting goods inwards or exporting goods, it's easy to do business in our zone. So there's the One, which is our flagship. There's Notori, which is also in the One axis. There's the Ipokiri, which is an up-and-coming greenfield, again in the One axis. That's already 3, right? And those are designated free zones already anyway. There's a coastal port in Lagos. There's Brass in Bayelsa. There's Ibaka, there's Awaritse. So there's Warri.
Some of the onshore swampy areas, oil companies, will use One as their base. You have One Free Trade Zone and you have the Notori Free Trade Zone. And what we have is a platform that allows all these oil companies to use it as their base, either for storage, for their logistics, and what have you when they're going on or offshore. And those are the opportunities that that exists for them. In addition to that, you have the what I would call their value chain businesses. So you have the oil servicing companies that follow those oil companies that also need to have a base, whether it be for storage of equipment, for pipes and what have you, or residential status or offices within those zones. And then you're going to have the servicing companies, whether it's your DHLs, your banks, and financial services, which they also need as well.
Any investor will look at the risks and look at the rewards. Now, there are different models to actually get some of these things going, right? PPPs are always a good option, right? Because what you're saying is you're taking some of the burden of the government in development of some of this infrastructure that needs to be put in place.
So there are different types of PPPs. With us, we give you a concession if you're a developer. We concession you for a few years. And so we're hoping that you'll build the zone, you'll operate it for a while, and then when your concession time is up, you then transfer to the government or to whoever buys it from you. That's our PPP model.
I have to say that the OGFZA have been very, very instrumental in getting quite a few companies to participate in their vision, which is to have, in my opinion, the best free zones in the country. And I want to just state very quickly that under the leadership of Mr. Omana, we've had a fantastic partnership whereby the process, the application of getting a free zone was extremely transparent, very professional.